Good morning, Pelham Road. Hope you're having a good day. If not, I hope it's going to get better from here on out. I need to finish a story we started yesterday. It's a rather long historical story, but we're already halfway there, so you can go the rest of the way with me. Just to remind you, I was sharing with you the story of Servetus and his arch rival, the great champion of orthodoxy, John Calvin. Because in their story, there is a secret, I think. And I want to go deeper than just Servetus bad, Calvin good, or heresy good, orthodoxy bad. If we want history to teach us how to break cycles, we can't just sort people into these crude binary positions of wicked and virtuous. So this story has something to teach us. And I think it really is teaching us about how to sort of live our faith with a bit of humility. Both Calvin and Servetus had a fire in them. Driven by their formidable faith, they pursued God's work with incredible conviction. There's something to admire in that, and also something to fear. The fire of faith can ignite our spirits, can it? Bring us to unparalleled hope. But if that fire gets out of control, I've seen it, it'll burn us down. So how did Servetus come to be the most despised heretic in all the world? Well, he lived during the Protestant Reformation. The big shots of the Reformation, you know, Martin Luther, John Calvin, and they wanted to condemn the Catholic Church, but they were terrified. They thought it was going too far in their dissent. So in other words, everybody is somebody's heretic. Calvin was the Pope's heretic. Further, simply put, Servetus was PR kryptonite. I mean, he went too far. You remember, he didn't believe in infant baptism. And so to enroll him in the school of acceptable reformers would undermine the reform that Calvin was really after. Now, compared to the forces that despised him and his belief, Servetus had the authority and the power of a napkin in the wind. He was without power. He was void of it. Many reasonable people, most reasonable people, in his shoes would have said, yeah, I see everybody lining up against me. I'm just going to be quiet. They'd go out of their way not to draw attention to themselves, but not this guy. When he was sentenced to die, after he was sentenced to die, he turned to John Calvin, reportedly said, I will burn, sir, but this is a mere event. We shall continue our discussion in eternity. Now that's some defiance and also some faith. So who was John Calvin? What kindled John's fire? Well, like his opponent, he was a man on a mission from God. Calvin was especially ambitious and determined to bring the world to his vision of faith. I mean, he could be, as you read him, a bit pompous and full of himself. It was something like, well, I know I'm the smartest Christian in the room, so why don't just the rest of you fall in line? And he really came remarkably close to that goal. He shaped the lives of millions. Historian Bruce Gordon describes him as a towering presence whose theological, pastoral, and legal brilliance distinguished him from all those around him. Some saw him as a visionary reformer, and others saw him as a tyrant. I mean, Calvin worked himself to death fighting for theological uniformity. Basically, to stop a denomination like ours from ever existing, one where we could have diversity of thought. Our presence here confirms his failure, at least in that one respect. His actions led to the killing of Servetus, but that bloody act of suppression led to shock waves of resistance. Sebastian Castellio, a preacher of that day, condemned Calvin for doing the devil's work, he said. What more could Satan do than burn those who call upon the name of Christ? Calvin, of course, even then did not yield an inch. He would not back down. He had done the right thing. He had stood his ground. This killing and the countless other heretics that have been killed shows us the disaster religion can lead to. The embers of faith can spark a wildfire, and that wildfire can burn everything that we love down. I mean, how many people do you imagine have been tortured and burned in the name of the Prince of Peace? Now, it really has to be said that Calvin was not a cartoon villain. I mean, I said yesterday that I was going to talk out of both sides of my mouth. I mean, he was a man who wrote of God's grace and the beauty of creation. He put it so well this way: there is not one blade of grass, there is no color in the world that is not intended to make us rejoice. And Calvin's Geneva, the town in which he worked in and served the church in and led civically, that city was no dystopia. It had public education for all children, boys and girls, had schooling for children that were poor, paid for by other citizens. It had institutions for the relief of the poor and the welcoming of the refugee. I mean, in the one person of John Calvin, we can see the incredible extremes that faith can lead us to. It can lead us to the Dead Sea, or it can lead us to Mount Everest. What's more interesting about Calvin and Servetus for me isn't their difference, but really how they were alike, how similar they really were. They're almost inverted versions of each other, brilliant, faith-driven people with the egos the size of Texas. And Calvin really only lived 12 years longer. He died at 54. Basically from having worked himself to death. The story of Calvin and Servetus told, and then their lives extinguished, leaves us with a question. What can we take from all of this? I know I've thrown a lot at you. Servetus was killed as a heretic. Maybe he was wrong. But he died because another man was stronger. Surely we have reached the point where we don't kill people because we differ on theology. But he wasn't wrong, at least not wrong in all ways. And Calvin, as time has proved, was not right in all ways. There is a lot to be angry and despairing about. But let's not focus only on the tragedy. This sad story shows us that the fiery convictions of one person can tilt the world on its axis. You see, seeing the intolerance of Calvin and the profound faith of Servetus, public opinion shifted massively against killing heretics. So a 1,000-year pattern of violence and suppression was altered by the actions of one faithful soul, and he was the one that was considered a heretic. But Calvin too changed the world for better or worse. The fire of faith was an inferno in their spirits. But that fire was disastrously unattended by humility and love. And that's the point. These two men hated each other, and both believed themselves to be so smart that they only knew the real truth about God, and the other, as they would say in the South, bless his heart. Now, with the great benefit of hindsight, we see that humility and love must be at the heart of faith. From the wisest Christian to the wisest atheist, no one has a monopoly on the truth. So let's bring a little bit of humility and love to the table, along with the fire. Have a good day.